The beautiful, beautiful rookie draft is now over. The honeymoon period has begun. You're looking at your beautiful roster and your haul. By the way, I love seeing rookie drafts. But look, what are we doing? Are we making any moves? Are we holding pat? You need to know what to do after the draft, too. It's like surviving a nuclear war. Probably not as extreme, but let's
I
get
hope not.
into it. Nate loves going first, so we're going to switch it up and go with him first this time. Nate, what is the first thing you were doing after your rookie drafts are over?
First thing I'm doing is looking at those sweet, beautiful gray cutouts on my roster. And I'm just so happy to have them. Like, look at those little faceless players on my roster. Gosh, they just make everything better. But you know what? Those little gray faces, I want them on my bench, most likely.
Yes.
I want them on my bench. I don't want those little gray faces in my starting lineup. We have Justin Jefferson, we have Jamar Chase, but those are outliers. And we have rookies that do produce the rookie season, but it's not week 1. It's not week 4 usually where they become consistent producers. It's not till after the bye week usually, into the second half of the season that some of those top rookies are becoming consistent week to week fantasy producers. But many of them do struggle to take off from the first 4 or 6 weeks. And some don't even have that incredible of seasons the rookie year. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years for a player to develop into what they're going to become. This is a what have you done for me recently kind of league, but players need to be given more than 1 year to develop and show out in the NFL. If I'm seeing those little gray faces in my starting lineup, I'm wondering how can I bridge the gap between when this player is going to actually be productive for my starting lineup. It's great. We spend the offseason trying to make sure that we are drafting good rookies. We're trying to make sure that we're setting up our team for success long term. But now that the rookie draft is over, we got to start looking at setting a lineup. We still probably have a couple months to go. We have some time to make some moves. If we don't have our full starting lineup right now, that's okay. We have some time, but we want to start looking at that now so we can start to get some moves together that are going to fill up that lineup. Maybe we drafted a wide receiver in the back half of the first who has a lot of potential, but maybe isn't in a great spot to start and score a lot of fantasy points the rookie year. For example, Quentin Johnston has a huge ceiling, but with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen in front of him, it might take, till the end of the season or a couple injuries and before he actually starts producing. What can I do to get points between now and then? That way, when those players become available that are those bridge players, you can pounce. When those players hit the trade block, you can go throw a 20, the next year's second round pick, the next year's third round pick. You can watch this video any year, 5 years ago, any year, 5 years from now. Brandon Cooks is the answer. He's a wide receiver you can pick up for cheap and he'll score you fantasy points. He's always the answer. Brandon Cooks. Other guys like that. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Don't want to count him out.
Yeah,
but it's true.
But Nate, real quick, I just want to touch on it. I love this point, and I think it's important to note too, like, where are you at as a team? Do you even need to worry about adding that starting piece? Because rebuilding teams don't necessarily need to, but then also just keeping in mind, like, we are all always very excited about rookies and tend to have the rose-colored lenses that they're going to produce year one. And they'll have games where they pop off and show you why they were highly drafted in the NFL, highly drafted rookie drafts, all these things. But you touched on the point of, like, when are they actually going to be consistent? And that's, when you don't feel good about them in your lineup. If you're a competitive team, maybe you don't need these guys till the end of the season anyway, which is when they're most likely to be doing their thing and popping off because they, have that time to get acclimated and go through their growing pains and things like that. But love this point. Love the concept of not necessarily having to rely on them and finding that stopgap between the rookie production that we want or that player's eventual production and where they're likely going to be day one.
One thing to add, Nate makes a great point. You're looking to start, setting a starting lineup soon, but not yet. And here's why I say this. There are going to be people that try to pressure you into making bad trades, saying things like, you don't have this or you need that. Now, if your rookie draft is a week before the season starts, I can understand that concept.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of things that can happen between now and the time that you need to submit a finalized roster. There's mini camps, there's rookie camps, there's training camp, there's preseason. There's a lot of things that happen. Guys that are highly touted now, you can get a coach's doghouse, you get pushed down the depth chart. So a lot of things happen. Let's remain calm and not make any bad moves.
Well, I just want to build on that point even more because it's a great point. You don't need to worry about setting. Well, hey, why not? We're here to group discuss this thing. You don't have to set a starting lineup till week one. You don't have to worry about that. I think the great point there too is that, trying to work you into a bad value trade because you have a hole to fill.
Yeah.
Just because you have a hole at a position on your lineup doesn't make the need to fill that hole any greater value. Like, you should not overpay to fill a hole in your lineup, to fill out a better starting lineup. You should still always be seeking appropriate value, appropriate market value, a little premium to go get your guy. But you should never have that in mind where it's like, well, man, if I get this one spot filled, may as well sell the farm for it, unless it's like, obviously if it's Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, whatever, fine. But,
Right.
Keep that in mind too when you're looking to fill your lineup. Still look for the best value pieces that you can get. When you're willing to move one piece, what's the best value piece you can get? That's always the name of the game when it comes to filling roster slots and things like that.
I agree. And Bob, what is your next thing that you were doing post-draft?
So I have issues when I don't get things I want.
Could
And I
have just
think this
stopped
boils.
after I have issues.
Yeah, true.
Amen.
I
We love
think
you, Bob. Couldn't
it
resist.
boils down to my OCD, and I want some of these rookies. Dang it! And that short list, it's burning if I miss any of them. I want to go get these guys. I'm kicking the tires on the rookies I wanted but didn't get to draft. And how much were these rookies actually wanted when they were drafted? Think about things like, in one draft, I drafted Rashee Rice at the top of the third round because of value. Immediately tried to move Rashee Rice for another player that was drafted a little later to try to, get a little value flip there, and ended up moving Jonathan Mingo, who I drafted earlier, for Marvin Mims, plus a second round pick or a second and third round pick flip next year.
You
And
stud.
this is the trade I discussed with you. I basically drafted two players. I drafted the one player, Mingo, and then was like, well, I want to move Rice. Wasn't able to move Rice. Still have Rice. Oh, well, I guess. Still got him a good value, so it's okay. But was able to then go kick the tires on, diversifying my revenue or my asset pool a little bit and then get more assets on top. So I think, not everybody that's drafted is like drafted because they love that player. Some players are just drafted because of need. Some players are drafted because of they feel like that's the best value on the board.
Yep.
That's a real thing. So I'm kicking the tires on those guys. And, now that the rookie draft is kind of past, there's a value flip coming again where veteran players, when you have to go to looks to start your setting lineup or set your starting lineup, veterans are going to be a little more valuable again, especially for teams that maybe drafted those kind of players that I really want still, that need more startable assets, consistent startable assets. So I'm looking to kick those tires on the rookies I wanted but didn't get to draft because I want them. Dang it. I want to get them on my roster. I want to get them as much as I can, especially if I wasn't able to get them elsewhere. If I get them in a couple leagues, I'm okay. I don't need them in every single league as much as I want them. But I'm looking to do that as much as I can because, when you believe in rookies, you should go get your guy. And when you believe in a player, you should go get your guy, especially when you believe in, very high aspirations for that player.
I do agree. My guy last year was Greg Dulcich. I tried to get him like everywhere. And, here's a good thing to do. If you can't get your guy this year, get your last year's guy if you couldn't get him.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Now might be a good time to go get a guy that you couldn't get last year. I'm looking to 2024. Look, like why wait? The way I see it, I'm looking at 2024. And if you head on over to patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, you would have already listened to our preview of the 2024 rookie class. Who or what can I move to get 2024 draft capital? 2024 class may be too far ahead for some players, and by some players I mean some dynasty players. They like to keep it in a smaller window. They're just thinking about the now, and I completely understand and respect that. So I want to start thinking about next year now. I want to load up on picks. That's what I want to do, especially if I think my team's going to be bad. Then I want to move some guys who I don't think are going to do much beyond this year, get them off my roster, and get that 2024 draft capital. What is another thing that you are doing while you're cuddling with your recently completed rookie draft?
Yes, I'm cuddling with those little gray faces over there, and I'm starting to look forward to the next gray faces. I want to expand upon your point, Mike. So you're talking about, getting that 2024 draft capital. Yep, now's the time to do it. You're going to even get it even cheaper mid-season. But we want to start looking that way if that's the timeline of our team. But knowing the timeline of our team, how does the positional strengths of our team and the timeline of those positions match up with the upcoming classes? And what I mean by that is last year was a great drafting need wide receivers because you could have picked up a bunch of wide receivers.
We
This
got
class-
spoiled, dude.
This class we
Yeah.
thought was going to be the running back class, and the NFL draft just crushed it. So sometimes, you can project out, but hey, it's football, it's sports, it's life. Sometimes things change like this draft, but this draft class, great tight end class, and actually ended up being a pretty decent wide receiver class. And I would argue that, you got a couple of decent quarterbacks at the top as well. So knowing the strengths of each class can really help you with knowing your timeline for your team and building your draft capital and your positions around that. For example, if you're going after 2024 first next year and you need quarterbacks, it's probably going to work out pretty well for you. You got Caleb Williams, Drake May out there. They look like top tier guys. Could have been QB1 in this draft, either one of those guys. You got a top wide receiver, basically the Bijan of wide receivers in next year's class, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, and there's a deep running back class next year. We'll see if the NFL draft wants to crush them as well. But lots of talent there. So you look at these classes and you start to understand. You don't have to get super into college football because it's a whole world. And I understand you don't want to watch games on Saturday. Maybe for some reason you don't want more football in your life because maybe you have responsibilities like family and work and stuff like that.
Priorities, man.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Sucks.
But you don't have to dive deep into the world of college football to just understand the top prospects of each class. You don't have to know the top 50 of each class. Just who are like the top 5 quarterbacks, the top 5 running backs, top 5 wide receivers. What are those guys, and how does the NFL draft Knicks projecting already feel about them? You got guys already dropping way too early 2024 mock drafts. I know we're going to drop one here soon. And knowing that kind of gives you an idea of what is coming next year. Things change as always, but I will tell you what, the draft community and the scouting community within college football, it's better than it has ever been before and is more predictive than it has ever been before. Josh Pate, I'm always going to throw some Josh Pate in there. He's great over with his show, The Late Kick. They went over how many players were 24/7 5-star recruits coming out of high school, and your chances of getting drafted in the first round. It's incredible how good the recruiting is, the scouting from recruiting in high school, scouting through college into the NFL draft. We have more data points than ever before. So knowing the future, it's easier than ever before. Make sure you're paying attention.
I do want to add on an Nate's point really quick. And this is, I have to credit Zach with making this point of always making a point to line up whatever your need is with the strengths of the draft that you're investing into.
Mm-hmm.
If this, the plan would have been this year to make running back your need. And if you were able to draft at the top of the draft, you were still okay. That wasn't too detrimental to you. If you had seconds, you maybe had to pivot to wide receivers, but draft those wide receivers, turning them into running backs later. But, having whatever your team need is, match up what the strength of the class is, just always good process to consistently make your team better. If you can do that, you need to have that pulse on the class of how the class is going to look to be able to do stuff like that. And it's best suited for like rebuilds. And then when you're coming out of your rebuild, it's going to be a good running back class. Load up. Getting into my next point, and this is just basically boiled down to roster management, roster size management. We discussed before the draft and during the draft that if you amassed a bunch of draft capital, you had a bunch of stashes. Now it's time to make cuts. You don't necessarily have to make them before the season, but if you ever want to start a starting lineup again, you're going to have to make some cuts to be within those roster limits. But how can I get within those roster limits as value efficiently as possible? I don't want to have to cut anybody that I'm confident somebody else is going to spend $2 fab on to go pick up off the waivers. There we go. 2 days later after waivers clear. I don't want to do any of that. I want to make sure I'm getting the most value I can, even if it's a 5th round pick next year, a 4th round pick next year, a 4th round pick 2 years from now. If I'm going to cut them anyway, and hopefully that's not too clear to the league, so you have some leverage in the deal. If I can flip, a 4th and 5th round pick, I don't get a straight up pick. Whatever the case is, moving quarterback handcuffs, if teams are valuing them in Superflex, obviously you're not going to be able to get that done in one quarterback. Running back handcuffs, though, if I have running back handcuffs that aren't mine, I don't play that game. That's just not something I like to do. If I have a running back that's another team's handcuff, I'm going to try to get it to that team for some value prop, one way or another. But keep in mind, this is tough because everyone is probably over the limit unless they didn't have many draft picks. You have to figure 60 players, in a 5-round draft, 12 team, were just added to 12 rosters across the league. However that's spread out is how it's spread out. But so you have to make sure it's value efficient for them as well. It has to make sense. But you are going to have those people, like I mentioned before, like the Jalen Nailers of the world, that are just cut fodder. You need to be able to make that designation of, if I cut this guy, nobody's probably going to pick him up anyway. So if that's the case, those are guys that get lumped into the cut pool. See you later. Go figure it out. But after rookie drafts, it's important to monitor that there are going to be people who neglect this concept of trying to make the best value moves to get some value back for players you're trying to cut, or, roster restrictions you're trying to uphold. Players are going to get cut. Rookies are going to get cut. Players who shouldn't be cut are going to get cut. And rookies that should have been drafted that didn't, just because they're flying under the radar, are going to be out there too. Not every draft is 5 rounds either. There's plenty of 3-round drafts out there, which I can respect with how some of these draft classes pan out anyway, and the rest are just fantasy UDFAs after that. I'm fine with, but you have to keep in mind that there's going to be players out there, especially in, not to be niche, but like IDP leagues, there's always players available in IDP leagues after the rookie draft. Even if they're 5 or 6 rounds, there's still players available. So keep that in mind. Keep an eye on who's getting cut. There's going to be a lot of activity in the chat, so you really have to, Sleeper is really great. You can filter transactions to see who's been dropped in a certain time frame, who's been dropped in the last month and a half, whatever. You can filter all that out. Be very diligent about seeing who's being dropped. Make those pickups happen from other teams' mistakes. Get those stashes on your roster before they get on somebody else's, or before that player pops off or a news blurb comes out that Izzy Abanaconda is the number 1 backup to Breece Hall this year. Things like that. Make sure you're being due diligent about that. If, say, he were to make it through a 3-round draft or a 4-round draft, be diligent about things like that. Be mindful of what's still kicking around after the draft, because you could argue draft ain't over, the offseason ain't over. Not time to tune out. It's time to tune in that much more. Get your work done, so the regular season is that much easier for you later.
I kind of marry Bob's point here a little bit, being just conscientious about how you deal with your roster after the draft too. I'm looking for value. I take this time to see who's been cut or what's out there on the wire, who wasn't drafted. And I'm looking for really, really good value here. Now's a good time to fill out your running back or wide receiver 3 or flex position, or maybe a couple taxi stashes, guys that, like Bob said, under the radar type guys that just slip through the cracks somehow. People get excited about a guy you think could make some noise in camp. Maybe if a couple people get moved around, he could be a good prospect for you. But it's all about the value. I end up somehow making a lot of trades after my rookie draft every year. That tends to be my most active time for trades for whatever reason. People are just a little more motivated. I want to scoop up some value after my draft. Bob, you got me all strategy out, man. I don't know if I could.
Sorry,
do it.
I got one more thing I want to add too. I'm not done.
No,
never
I'm done, Mike. You give me a half hour to record a video, I'm taking the half hour to record a video. So I just want to bring up. I just want to bring up Nate's point again about Taxi Squad, about using that mindfully and what you need it for. If you're a rebuilding team, putting players on there that you're going to keep throughout the year, more valuable than putting actual stash designated players. But if you're a competitive team, putting tight ends on there, especially ones that aren't likely to produce early, a lot of times my Taxi Squad is just a tight end farm.
Same.
And I think a lot of people do that, and I think that's a pretty regular practice. But
you think a lot of people do that, Bob?
We know.
I'm sure yours look a little rough. If I'm being totally honest, Kenny Yeboah type stuff. But
actually, I'm gonna say this: there was a league where I was cutting a lot of my guys, and Pork texts me and he's like, "This must be really hard for you." I'm like, "You know what? Just leave me alone. I need a minute." I was cutting rough. Kenny Yeboah, Kylan Hill, LaMichael Pirine. I'm cutting all these guys. Taps was playing in the background of my house. I'm like, how'd you guys get in here? But yeah, I'm sorry, Bob. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. But we've discussed with somebody like Sean Tucker is somebody who I would not throw on a Taxi Squad, because I think we're going to know what he's going to be pretty quickly. I think we're going to know if he's going to be a Justin Ross or if he's going to be somebody like, an Austin Eckler, who has not necessarily that type of rise or anything like that, but is able to be utilized early, immediately somebody that's worth holding on to. But otherwise I want to keep that spot available, that Taxi Squad spot available for somebody I know I'm keeping, and then have my bench available if I need to cut Sean Tucker, or if I need to cut these other guys that are random people that, if I'm rebuilding, I'd rather have the flexibility of my roster. And even if I'm contending in this case, I probably would just keep Sean Tucker around off of my taxi squad and find other pieces to put on there that are, those tight ends, those wide receivers that might need a little time, especially if I have a deeper wide receiver room. Using your taxi squad, if you have one, to the best of your abilities is a low-key strategy that I don't think enough people talk about. It's not just for stashing players, and there's good ways to really get a lot more value out of your taxi squad than just having a spot to stash players that aren't scoring you points. While that is it for the video today, I do hope you all enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the video itself. And in case you missed the exciting news, we have our very own 2023 Dynasty Rewind Rookie Draft Guide available. With this Rookie Draft Guide, you'll gain access to our film grade, player insights, and Dynasty Outlooks for every single player we believe to be fantasy relevant. On top of that, you'll receive several articles. 5 things you need to know before your draft, rookie draft trends and strategy, best rookie draft values, rookie sleepers, players to draft at your own risk, our My Guys, and a 2024 draft preview. All in all, you'll receive over 70 pages of content. The link for that draft guide will be in the pinned comment below, as well as the YouTube description box. If you enjoyed this video or any of our other content, I really hope you check it out, because I really think you're going to love what we've put together. But hey, that's going to be it for us today. We will see y'all in the next one, but until then, y'all have a good one.